Good morning. Welcome back to Talking Racine. This is Mr. George Myers. This is Mr. Jim Spodek. I'm Dr. Ken Jorgen. Welcome. It's good to see you again. Just a brief update here is the last episode I spoke about a letter that was sent, an email that was sent to the City Council asking their opinion on the arena project. To date, about a week later, I have received 2 responses. And so I resent the request for information to all the members of the City Council just this morning. And Jim will put this up on the screen so you can pause and read it if you choose to. I'm not going to bother to read through it today because it's basically the same thing as last time. Just reiterating to them that I would like to know what their position is on the arena project. Okay, so from there we're going to move into the Foxconn phenomenon. Which is all the talk here in Racine County and across the nation, basically. It's a big topic of discussion. And one of the things that we want to discuss is the means by which they are acquiring the property for this big mega development. And one of the means by which they're doing that, or one of the alternatives that they're exploring, is eminent domain. And George, you want to say a few words on eminent domain?
Let's first get an understanding out there about what this is all about. It comes from the Fifth Amendment to the United States Constitution, and it's called the Takings Clause. And just what it says, you're taking something.
They'll take your stuff.
Right. Now, the Takings Clause reads, quote, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." So there's 2 key things we're looking at there. One is it's taken for public use. And normally this means things like highways or schools or something that has to do with the public. Yeah, it can deal with utilities. And the second thing is just compensation, which means you are adequately paid for the property. So keeping that in mind, now we proceed over into what Foxconn is doing. And they need a huge amount of land. And through the years, this takings clause, where it talks about public use, has been changed to mean it can be for private use as long as the public benefits from it. Well, this has been so far constricted to things like big developments or something like Foxconn, that type of thing, where it's a private company, but we see a broad public use for it. Because if you went just with private property for public use, public benefit, well, heck, any business would qualify, because any business that starts up is helping the public out. It creates jobs, and we need that type of thing.
Well, it's a comparative thing, because right now there's food being raised on that property. So what we're talking about is the crop going from food crops to an economic crop, which is jobs. So
right. And you're looking at Foxconn, which is big. Now, center to all this is the Kelo decision. Now, you probably heard about that. It went back a couple of years ago.
In New London, Connecticut.
That was in New London, Connecticut. And Suzette Kelo was the plaintiff. In other words, her property was being taken. They were taking her house, and it was for just what we would consider just a mall. It was a big development in the city of New London, and it was obviously for private use. But the Supreme Court, both of Connecticut and of the United States, said that, well, there was enough new jobs, and it created more taxation, more tax revenue, a wonderful thing, and so therefore it was within the definition of public use. And Suzette Kelo argued it and lost in both the Connecticut Supreme Court, which was 4-3, and the United States Supreme Court, which I believe was 5-4. It was very close at any rate. And she lost her property. And interestingly enough, this isn't necessarily part of the argument.
What's an interesting fact?
Part of it is that this was a developer who was doing like all developers do these days, using public money and tax breaks and all this type of stuff. Well, the bottom line is the whole project fell through. So the result was is they'd moved her property and they enshrined her house in another part of the state or city or something, and at any rate, the property now sits as a vacant piece of land and nothing ever got developed on it. The whole thing fell down,
Right.
and there we sat. We'd gone through all this, her having to move her property for what? For nothing. Nothing got developed. It's, at this day, just a vacant piece of land.
Well, all I can say is thank God nothing like that has ever happened in Racine.
Yeah.
You know, but one of the things that when it went to the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas said, and it was kind of, he dissented, but he said, we can protect you in your home, which that can be argued too. We can protect you in your home, but we can't protect your home. That was quite a statement.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
an interesting perspective.
Well, that's
We can
right.
protect you in your home, but we necessarily can't protect your home. And that was what he said on that kilo.
oh
yes,
my God,
yes.
I wasn't familiar with that
Yeah.
quote. That's outrageous.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a controversy.
Right, and we're going to facing it now here in the county. If there's some people out there that have property that they simply don't want to sell. Now, if they don't mind selling it, and they're concerned about getting just compensation, I don't think that's a real good argument. The law is pretty well settled on that. Just compensation means what the property value is now, not what it's going to be after it's been developed. And what I understand is the property out now there, where it's normally selling about 5,000 an acre,
Yeah,
something like that. They're offering almost 10 times that amount. So just compensation is satisfied. Don't worry about people out there getting enough money for their property. That's been taken care of.
Well, we haven't confirmed
Well-
that with anybody who sold their property.
Right.
Right.
I mean,
Well, that is apparently taken care of. Let's
Yeah,
put it that way.
yeah.
Then. What the concern is how about the person that's been in the family farm for 3 generations? They don't want to sell it. They want to stay there. What are their rights? And that's where we're getting down to the kilo type of decision and what's going to go on with Foxconn. Because after this kilo decision, there were a lot of states that were very concerned about that. I think all but 5 states made some action either in the legislature or in the judicial branch of the government so that would not happen in their state. And as a matter of fact, Wisconsin also took action to do it. Governor Jim Doyle signed into law Wisconsin Act 233. So it was an actual law which prohibits condemnation of non-blighted property for transfer to a private entity.
Well, there's
All
the
right?
key, though.
Now we're getting into what does it mean by non-blighted?
Exactly.
But Wisconsin did take some action so that it couldn't be just done the way it was done in New London. So that's where we face what we today.
Read for them what the definition of blighted is by
All right.
by that.
Now, non-blighted property is defined by a list of conditions that may make the property a detriment to the, quote, public health, safety, or welfare. So that's what
Well,
that's what blighted property is.
if it is one of those things,
If it is one of those things, if
Then
it is a detriment to the public health, safety, or welfare, then it can be considered blighted property. Now, my question is how can you take a wheat field or a cornfield and consider it a detriment to the public health, safety, or welfare?
and
That's going to be a real... and Dr. Ken Jorgen has an answer for you.
my suspicion is this is a project that Governor Walker very much wants to go forward, or at least he wants to be able to make it go forward if he wants to. So the argument will become it's a comparative value. Now you've got the food crops that are going out there as opposed to the crop of jobs, and which is going to be more benefit to the public good. And I think they will argue that the jobs are of greater benefit to the public good than the farmland is, and blighted, regardless of what you think about blighted, by a strict definition that they will put forward, they're going to say that
it says it's got to be a detriment to the public health, safety, or welfare. Now, it's that third category,
Exactly.
welfare. Is keeping it a wheat field or cornfield, keeping it farmland, a detriment to the public welfare if it prevents Foxconn from coming in
Right.
and turning this into a
Here's
huge
my read on
manufacturing
it.
job for
Yeah.
13,000 people.
Allegedly a good thing.
Right.
Here's my read. I agree with you. How is a wheat field or a cornfield a detriment?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm going to pay you $50,000 an acre for that detriment. Who you're not going to say, "Wow, I'll never get this price. I'm going to sell." But grandma, who's been living in her home for 30, 40 years,
Or generations.
Yeah, she could be the daughter of the
right?
daughter.
But that piece of property, it's a home. Maybe it's and there were 100 people that showed up at the Mount Pleasant town hall in asking, how am I to get what kind of property value am I going to get for mine? And he said, well, you're going to get fair market value. One lady asked, well, why am I not getting 10 times the value? Because exactly this, because the farmer, you can't really call that a detriment to a community, but that home, who now is going to be across the street from a mega factory who is dispensing heavy metals, that could be a blighted property. And I think they can push this through that way. So the real losers here are going to be the little small lot homes that are within this takings, and I think those are the ones that are going to be considered blighted. I don't think they're going to go after the farmland, because I think they're going to buy that farmland out straight and pay a huge price for it. If it actually happens, and I don't even think any of this is even going to happen, but that's my personal.
Well, if it goes to the Supreme Court, I mean, right now, the Wisconsin Supreme Court is pretty favorable to Scott Walker.
Yeah.
I mean, he's had some appointments up there. Well, actually, they don't make appointments. I'm sorry, they're elected. But, the candidates are chosen, and there's a certain amount of money that goes into the campaigns for the people.
You might as well call them appointed, but
Well, and that'll be the challenge that I see for this Supreme Court of Wisconsin. Is it going to be, is it beholden to the Constitution, or is it beholden to Scott Walker? And if it's truly conservative, and I'm not talking about political, but if it's truly conservative in the terms of the Constitution, then it'll be looking at the Constitution and saying, is this land public health, safety, or welfare type of problem, or is it okay? But if it's more concerned about what Scott Walker thinks, then it's apt to interpret the way that you're afraid it's going to interpret it. And that'll be a real test.
And we know that Scott Walker is considered conservative. I mean, that's his self-proclamation, and that's pretty much.
I just look at him as conservative in a different field.
Oh, no, I understand. I'm talking
politics.
about in the public mind.
Yeah, well, okay.
He's considered conservative.
Well, and politically conservative, I think he is too.
You've got to remember, every politician is lining up on this Foxconn again. I mean, you've got the mayor of Burlington now coming over, preparing for Foxconn. I mean, this huge political push. I mean, even this new mayor, Mason, that comes in, who, environmentally, he seems to have no problem with the environmental impact that he so strongly believes in, the other side of it. But when Foxconn came in,
he broke the party line.
Well, that's an interesting thing to explore. I mean, the potential environmental impact of Foxconn. Why don't we talk about that for a minute? I mean, there is all kinds of toxic elements that are a part of this manufacturing process.
We leave the eminent domain. There's a couple things I'd like to emphasize.
Well, we want to go to the federal Supreme Court too. We didn't mention that. That's a possibility.
Well, if it goes up, if it goes that far,
far.
But when it comes to the farmland, I think the people who are neighbors to the farmer, could have some impact on it, as opposed to where there's a house that they're considering blighted. If they're considering a wheat field blighted and a detriment to the public health, safety, or welfare, I think the neighbors could have something to say about that. We'd say, no, that's a perfectly fine wheat field. Whereas when you get to a house, they can go in there and can say, well, it's an old heating system, it's got a roof problem, blah, 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 and they figure how it's blighted somehow. And if you're right, Jim, and you think the farmers are going to say $50,000 an acre or whatever it is, 10 times what it's worth, they'll probably sell out. There might be someone there, though, who really doesn't want to sell their farm no matter what. They've lived on it their whole life. Their children.
There may be somebody there that has this principle that says, my generations have lived here, and I'm not moving. And I understand that, we've seen pictures of the New York
skyscrapers around this little house in the center there, because they said, no, we can't take that lady's house, so they built all around her, and it's a very, very strange picture. But the point is it's possible to do it, and I think Foxconn could even build around such a lot like that. But that would be something that we could consider as people, particularly those people that are neighbors to that, if it comes out to that's the case with a piece of farmland. Now, when it comes to a house, though, that's out there, that'll be a different story, and that's where we're going to get. We're just, I don't know how we're going to see that, but let's see if it comes up. If it does come up, we'll look into it, and we'll report to you, and we'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, well, I'm going to speculate here just a little
Okay.
bit. Now, if this were to go to the Wisconsin Supreme Court, and the court ruled that, yes, this can be taken by eminent domain, then the homeowners could appeal to the federal court because that precedent has been set by Connecticut, even though the federal court doesn't have any business ruling on a state constitution. It's happened now in Connecticut.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
So it's possible
Right.
that it could go to the federal court. Now,
Right.
the federal court is not obligated to take a case.
Well, I'll tell you where the
But they
federal court.
might.
I'll tell you where the federal court gets its power, and it's through the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was the one that brought the whole federal court into the states. Prior to that, the
Right.
federal court had nothing to say about the states, and you're right on that. But I think that's where, in fact, it says in this report here that I'm reading from that it's through the fifth and the 14th Amendment that the Supreme Court was ruling on this. So,
Yeah.
so the precedent's set. It's there, and the Supreme Court will get to review our Supreme Court if
But you know,
Well,
as
the
time-
interesting thing there is that even though, Trump is there and he's behind this, and
Yeah,
he's
let's
had
see
a
how
couple of-
conservative
he's had a couple-
politically that.
he's had a couple of appointments to the court now, but right now the court is divided 4-4 plus a swing vote.
Yeah.
So it'd be interesting to see which
I don't
way
think
would
they'll
that
take.
swing
I don't
vote
think
go.
they'll take it. I don't think they're going to take it. I think they're going to walk from this thing. This is
I would think they would use Kelo for it and use Kelo and say, we've already decided that for Connecticut, the same thing applies to
Well,
you.
Roberts is the guy who would decide whether the case is taken or not.
All right, well, we shall see. Now I've had my fill on
Enough
the
of that. Let's move on to the environment
Yeah,
now.
yeah.
Well,
And the possibilities that are presented there. Now, we've got a report here. You want to go through this a little
Well,
bit, Jim? This,
you know,
you had brought this up in the discussion.
I guess it's just the heavy metals. Are we talking about the environmental part of it?
Yes.
The heavy metals. There's been some talk and
There is some concern about the actual
Yeah.
environment. I didn't realize it till I was listening to these two talking about this show tonight, and I thought, wow, because I couldn't see what would be the environmental problem. But
well, it's the heavy metals that
come.
come off these LED screens, and I don't know expert on this, but you know we talk about. I think there's a list here. It seems to-
Cadmium, chromium, zinc, and copper. Quite a few heavy metals used in this process. None of these things are anything you want in your water supply. And the way the environmental regulations are being handled here, this is being fast-tracked, and essentially it boils down to the company self-regulating.
Right.
Now, is this a company that has a history of being trustworthy with the comments? The comments.
Self-regulating. I understand that they were having to comply with all the.
Well, self-monitoring, which is the
Environmental
same as self-regulating.
Well,
I mean,
yeah.
if you're
They're
monitoring and you
relaxed,
say
relaxed
yeah, well,
environmental regulations.
There are relaxed
Relaxed.
environmental
Yeah.
regulations.
if they're
So-
doing their own oversight.
You know, some of this stuff too, though. I mean, we're talking barium, and we're talking some heavy metals that can cause birth
Yeah, when you
defects
mention
and
copper and
everything.
zinc, I mean, I take tablets of that. Guys,
Well,
Well,
make a
yeah.
good job there, George. You take any tablets.
no,
well, you're
yeah,
taking
I
in
do.
copper
But-
if you
but
eat
what-
green vegetables.
I'm not
Right.
taking it out of the ground copper. It,
Yeah,
it comes
got it.
chelated, and it's got various things. in it.
Benzene is another one that's available
I mean, there's
for consumption.
I don't know.
Benzene is some nasty stuff. I
Right.
mean,
So when you talk about eminent domain, they say, well, your home is going to be across the street from Foxconn, which has had these heavy metals. I'm telling you, there's a lot of different angles that can be used on this. And, it's just one of those things. We can have a whole show on environmental impact of Foxconn and what's happened and the other factories, or whatever you call it, all over the world that have had some real issues with their environmental impact and communities. But I think we'll leave it at that. But the fact is that there are some heavy metals that are produced on these LED screens, and it really should be addressed. That leads us into the contract with the.
Oh, the
Here we go.
contract.
This
This
is-
is.
have you seen the contract?
I have not. No, I apparently
Shades of national health care.
Have you asked to see the contract?
apparently, I don't have it in front of me, but the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, WEAC, is that what it's called? Is that what it is?
No,
WEDA,
No, it's not WEDA.
Wisconsin Economic
Development
it will be
Corporation.
WEDA. Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation will be WEDC.
Right.
Yeah.
That's not WEAC. There's no A in there.
Okay.
Okay.
The thing about it is,
We learn things on the show, so
we're not all good at this. But that contract is not going to be exposed to the general public until after it's signed.
That's amazing.
How do you do that with public dollars? Now, I did find
we
out.
got into a national health care program that way.
Yeah.
Remember, how are we going to know what this is until we pass it? You know, we
Right.
have to,
Yeah, it's
live
just
under it
stick.
before we know
Right.
what's in there.
This whole, I tell you, I just go back to the whole thing, the way it was put together, how fast we had to have this $3 billion financing, the hurry up. Now there's no, just wait, the contract's fine. I'll tell you, man, if there isn't a scam here, this whole thing is.
If there's no scamming, they're missing a great opportunity.
Right. I mean, there's just something is
Let me
terribly wrong.
reiterate with my concern about that headline about
Yeah.
Foxconn, where
It's
it had 8
just-
politicians on the stage and 1 businessman.
Yeah.
Everybody from the president to our
Exactly, and everybody's lining up. I mean, you got Democrats, you got Republicans. I mean, even what what's the environmental group that
EPA.
that backed Corey Mason.
Oh, the
He
Sierra
endorsed-
Club.
Sierra Club endorsed
Yeah.
Corey Mason. Well, guy just endorsed this environmental heavy metal barium company, and you're endorsing him. I just don't get it. There's nobody standing up to any of this stuff. I don't see anybody.
But Corey Mason has often spoken in favor of the environment.
Well, I guess that's as good as it has to get.
One of the things I'm concerned with is they're talking about as many as 14 million gallons a day of water going to this plant. And what in the heck are they using it for? Well, apparently they're using it for washing and cleaning, and I can't help but
Well, they wash
believe-
between the screens apparently.
Yeah.
And that's where the heavy metals are washed through, or metals are washed through, not necessarily. But then apparently some of this stuff is put in barrels and containers, and then
Well,
they
they're
boil
extracting
it.
a lot of it, but I don't
Right.
know that they're extracting all of it.
Well, why so much water? As much water that Racine, the whole city of Racine, uses in one day, Foxconn will also use that amount of water.
Well, it's like if you got a turd in a punch bowl, it's rather offensive. But if you have one floating in a
Water-
lake, who's going to notice?
Right.
So if you take millions of gallons of water to dilute these things, it's less noticeable and,
Right.
and it meets environmental standards.
Exactly. I mean, if we
Which
wash this through,
Yeah.
now we're talking a huge amount of
And
water.
we know that's a common practice.
And exactly, and that
So you think by what they're essentially is they're putting the same amount in, they're putting a certain amount of these chemicals in there. If they put it in 1 gallon of water, we'd say, wow, stay away from that. But
Yes,
if you put it
yeah.
in 15 million gallons of water,
Not a big
it
deal.
looks okay.
Right.
They're putting, but regardless of whether it's 1 gallon or 15 million gallons, it's the same amount is going into Lake Michigan.
Right. It's
And then
measured.
that-
It's measured in parts per million.
Right.
So
Well,
So,
interesting.
the more-
That's
is that-
an interesting concept, and it might be something we
no, we
need
don't.
to
We
look
don't
at.
know that that's what's happening, but we've seen it happen in other instances, and there's reason to suspect that it could happen here.
Very, very interesting concept. The overall view that when I look at Foxconn, another concern besides those 8 politicians that were on the stage there, every president on down, is that people are looking this as the, what do I want to call it? The
Silver
savior,
bullet.
the savior, silver bullet.
Yeah.
This is the thing that's going to come from overseas and come in to our county here, and it's going to change everything. It's going to rescue. It's going to be like the Son of God
white
has
knight
arrived.
riding
yeah.
in.
Yeah, I'm saying, wait a second. Nothing. I'm afraid. I just don't believe anything is that good. Nothing's going to come here and just rescue us while we all sit around and just grab on and ride. We've got to be participating in it somehow. And
Right.
if we're not participating in it, then I say, well, how can we be sure? What makes us think that this sole entity coming in from Malaysia or wherever it is going to do the job for us, where we didn't do it ourselves.
Well, look at the volume of jobs.
I just have a problem with that concept.
I agree.
Okay.
Look at the volume of jobs. I mean, Scott Walker pledged that he would create 250,000 jobs in 4 years.
Right.
And it's been 8 years, and he's come nowhere near that. Now everybody's all excited about 13,000
And
jobs.
that's another thing.
13,000 potential jobs.
Right.
At a cost of $3 billion.
Right.
And it will take until, what did they say? Was it 2030 or 2040?
2035 or something, just 2030.
Just to break even.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And who knows if that plant is even going to be
What about LEDs?
Usable by then.
I mean, are they still going to be around? I mean, who knows what what we're going to be having? The technology moves so quick.
Yeah.
What are they going to do?
Could move
10
on to
years from now?
holograms.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many issues here on we can talk about it. We can talk about the plant and the there's supposed to be this impact of the communities. It's not going to have an impact. They're going to have bowling alleys, theaters. The lifestyle is different, and then you talk about the visas. That's a whole other issue to talk about on Foxconn. People coming over here, they're not all going to be hired. Amazon can't keep employees. They can't get enough employees.
Yeah.
They are not gonna. This is not gonna be.
Which takes me back to my concern is that somebody's going to come in here, and we think somebody's going to come in here and do it for us.
Right.
And if they think that, well, why aren't we doing it for ourselves? Well, because we're not capable. Right. Well, then are we capable of fulfilling all these jobs that they're talking about? And then you're talking about saying they're bringing visas, so they're going to bring people in also.
Absolutely.
So that fits in with that concern of mine is saying if that's what's happening, that shows that nobody's going to come in here and just do it for us.
George, they're bringing in a Chinese sweatshop is what they're doing.
Well, they talk about, too, the $55,000 a year jobs.
Yeah.
Now, if you average that out, are you averaging in the management wages? And when you say $55,000 a year, are you talking about benefits included in that? Are you talking about overtime included in that? I mean, there's all types of considerations that haven't really been expressed, that haven't been explained.
Well, the big concern I have with that is they're billing right now, what, $2 an hour?
Yeah.
Payers? Now all of a sudden they're going to come here and they're going to do it $55,000 a year, which is about $30 an hour. $27, $28 an hour.
Right.
I
don't see it.
There's some incongruities here.
This all just talk.
It's that if it's a 40-hour week.
Yeah.
Right. That's right. I'm talking about 2,000 hour a year that I'm talking about. Yeah, it breaks down to those hours, but hourly rate. But the thing is that it doesn't come together real well. Let's put it that way. That this foreign entity, and foreign, I'm not talking about foreign from the United States. I'm talking foreign from us.
Right.
It's not coming. It could come from Iowa. I'd be saying the same thing if it came from Iowa. The thing is something's going to come in here and rescue us because we can't deal with it ourselves. There's a problem.
Well, in the meantime, it's hard for people to really establish a business. I mean, that's what Racine grew on in the past. Small businesses, somebody had an idea, started building something in their garage or their basement. Eventually, they had to hire a couple other people, and all of a sudden, boom, you got Incinerator, or you got J.I. Case, or you got Western Printing, or you got any one of these.
Something's wrong. I'm just telling you, something's wrong. The more you dig into this.
Well, what's going on now, it's difficult to start a business.
Right.
It really is difficult.
But the natural way would be is if we loosened up that getting away those limitations, those restrictions, let businesses start up, and they start up, and then we do it naturally and slowly.
Exactly.
The population starts catching up, stays with it, and learns a little better, does a little better in school. Like some of the high schools were teaching kids how to be mechanics, and they were graduating from there, and they were going into the shops being mechanics and running the whole whole service division.
Well, it's a pet peeve of mine when these politicians run on the idea of deregulating and getting government off of people's backs. Everybody says that's a great idea. But who gets deregulated? The gigantic corporations, the little guy that's trying to start a business.
Well, that needs to be done at the local level. That needs to be done in Racine.
And we've got some information that we're going to bring up in the future here about how Racine actually has done small business, and we've got some documentation that we've got another show.
But I'm saying that the natural way is if you do it where you do it yourself, you deregulate the business build up, then the education catches up with that, and you
the community.
You build on your. That's right. Thank you.
And
our community. You heard it.
Another thing is that government needs to cooperate with the community that's trying to develop. And a lot of people don't understand government. They don't understand how government functions. Which brings us to the point that a lot of people really don't understand how government works. It's been a long time since you had civics in high school. Maybe you slept through class, I don't know. But there's a lot of people that don't understand the particular divisions of government, how they interact with one another, how people get elected to or appointed to these things, and there is a solution to this. There's a group that's forming here, right in Racine, and they're going to be offering forums and seminars and educational opportunities.
What's the name of that group?
It's Rise Racine or Rise Wisconsin. It's Rise.
Rise Racine. Yeah,
Rise
it came
something.
coming from Indiana.
Yeah. That's
A successful group there, and we're going to latch onto it.
Yeah, and we'll be able to offer people an opportunity to learn about their government.
Yeah, it's one thing to know how government's supposed to operate, which this will show, but it's also how it'll explain how government is malfunctioning, which it's doing in Racine right now.
Well, once you learn how it's supposed to operate, you take a look at what's going on, and you'll say, wait a minute, that ain't right.
So this is take some of the things we've discussed, but they're going to bring up some new stuff here, and it's going to be available to the public, and this could really help us in doing what we're trying to achieve, which is having a resurgence of Racine. Let's get the government doing what it's supposed to be doing,
and
quit doing what
educate
it's
some
not
people,
supposed to be
and
doing.
possibly, maybe there's some candidates out there that want to run for office. This is a great opportunity to kind of get engaged with the community and
Could be
learn
fun.
It could be.
Could be.
No.
Could be.
So we'll keep you posted on that, and say thank you to everybody for joining us here this morning.
Thanks
And
for coming.
We'll let you get on with your day, and we appreciate you being here. Bye now.